What's up, Rotogrinders? This is the NFL Weekly Preview with TheLuuch and TJ. What's up, TJ Laessig? How are you on this cold Monday in Pennsylvania?
Doing pretty well. It's a little bit of a different Monday for us as we do not yet have DraftKings pricing, and we are just now starting to have some FanDuel scores from yesterday trickle in. So it's a little bit less information than we're used to working with here, but happy to be back with you as always and talk through a little bit of what we saw last week and then what we think heading into week 6 here of the 2020 season.
Week 6 already. It's been a roller coaster. We don't always know who's playing from day to day. Still waiting on that Titans-Bills game Tuesday night. I'm holding my breath with that one. We'll see what happens. A lot of schedule changes, a lot of games being moved. Factor all that in with FanDuel's hiccup with not having live scoring. I mean, like you said, we just got the results in, so I just had like a quick sweat when I opened the app, right? Just boom, But what was your Sunday like without live scoring? Because mine was brutal. I was like, what do I do with myself? Do I bust out the number 2 pencil in the paper? Like, I don't know. I just felt myself not as engaged with my FanDuel teams. And I had some pretty important contests I wanted to follow. That live scoring is life, TJ, right? Feel me on that one or no? What was your Sunday like?
Absolutely. I mean, I'm a big sweat the game, sweat my lineups guy, and it's just, yeah, sure, you know what players you have and you know what they're doing, but you don't even know ownership percentages. So it's not even it wasn't the same. I mean, you can only guess so much. You can probably generally have a feeling of, okay, things are going well or not going well. But other than that, you're flying blind, and it takes a lot of the fun out of it there from a FanDuel perspective. So let's hope that they get that figured out, because we're gonna certainly need some live scoring sweats in the future Sundays. And yeah, but hey, we're gonna get our $100 credit.
Up to $100.
Up to $100.
Oh, you gotta love it.
Man, myself and some others, I'm sure, are just that's just not the best response, I think, from them. Now, what should they have done? I don't really know, but it's a tough situation. And FanDuel, I mean, I like playing on FanDuel because I've historically had some success there. But I mean, the product is just seems like they don't even care. They don't put a ton of effort into it, and it's just tough scene for them right now.
I'm glad I don't have to make decisions on their end with things happening, and I guess I'll just leave it at that. I like both sites. I've had success at different parts of my DFS career on both sites too. At one point, I played a lot of NBA on FanDuel. There used to be a lot more contests available, and I don't know the numbers, but I feel like there's not as many contests. I think like the number available have decreased over the years for whatever reason. So, I play both, but yeah, just not the same for me on Sunday. Last week, our early week podcast, we give you a lot of gut calls and just some numbers and some analysis. And we had some bad, but a lot of good last week. We said, hey, this Carolina game is going to carry some ownership. And Mike Davis was mega chalk, but that was good chalk. I saw your entry. We were both in the luxury box on FanDuel. We were both in the Sunday sweat. And we had some similar pieces there for sure. We both, we stuck with Mike Davis, right? And, there's a lot of fantasy goodness in that Carolina game. I saw you played Bridgewater per dollar. He was good. But anything, injuries aside, anything that surprised you or, maybe some bad chalk last week or anything that caught your eye immediately?
Yeah, it's an interesting week. I mean, I think Mike Davis is officially, unless they start jacking his price way up there with the Zekes and the Kamaras, I mean, he's going to be pretty close to a lock button every week. I mean, he's just getting all the carries, all the targets, and he really is like a CMC light right now. And I didn't really know if that was going to happen or if he was going to be able to produce with that volume, and he is. So he's a big win for the running backs don't matter crew for sure. And then, yeah, I mean, Robbie Anderson also is looking pretty legit from the Carolina side there. So I thought that was interesting. I also thought, Edwards-Helaire was someone that I was pretty high on, and he kind of hurt me across the board. And, yeah, it's tough to know what to do with him. I mean, the Chiefs obviously had a different game script than expected, but they still put up 30-some points, and he didn't do much of anything. So,
God forbid the guy ever
quite in that elite tier.
God forbid he ever scores, right? Like, come on.
Right? Like, you can't get into the end zone ever.
He actually had a reception touchdown called back on a pick play. I don't know if you saw that. I cringed when I saw it in red zone. I'm like,
soft one.
A very soft one.
I don't
Questionable.
know. Seemed very questionable to me.
Questionable call.
Maybe it's because I had him in some of my lineups, but it was questionable.
Yeah, I agree. So he was highly owned, and he didn't pan out. One of the highly owned guys. And, if he would have scored, he would have had, 14 or 15 FanDuel points. You can get by with that. Yeah, I guess other than that, the Brandon Cooks bounce back was real. Of course, good old fantasy, go back to the well. Wasn't involved against the Vikings, and this week he was heavily involved. And you had some Houston stacks that did some damage. For the first quarter and a half, you're like, I don't know what the live scoring says, but I can tell you by my math it's not very good. But Deshaun ended up kind of going off, 3 tutties, 359 through the air, I believe. Cooks had a big game. Will Fuller caught a score. So Houston stacks was kind of one of those high Vegas total games people were targeting, and they delivered. They delivered. Not much to run back on the other side. I had DJ Chark in one of my higher stakes lineup. He got hurt. One of the injuries we'll talk about. Chenault had an okay game. And if these scores stand, and I think they are, I'm just looking at my FanDuel app as we speak, 2 of the top 4 Millie teams in the $4 Sunday Million played some kind of game stack, whether it was 1 quarterback and 1 receiver, or there's 2 of the top 4 teams that had a quarterback and 2 of their receivers and didn't run it back with anybody from the other team. That it's rare that is the way to go, but it's plausible, I guess. And when you're a team like the Jags, where who knows, you throw a couple injuries in there, where's the ball going, right? How are they going to move the ball? Robinson was another guy who was heavily owned running back who didn't pan out. Another common theme continues here a lot. Zeke was pretty good, right? But some of these other chalk backs it's almost like, play the chalk QB wide receiver guys like we talked about, and maybe get different at the tailback position. So those were kind of my takeaways. Not exactly hashtag play whoever you want kind of thing, but some very interesting builds in the Millie. And if this does stand, this guy Chow Mein, I'm speaking unofficially here. It's Monday. The app update. It looks like everything's in. He did not have Chase Claypool, who was 0.5% in the Millie. So we'll get to the Steelers then too. But I guess that's kind of it for big takeaways from the week for me. I mean, we have a lot to talk about, but those were some of the things now that we've seen the scores and everything finally. But yeah, crazy day.
Yeah, definitely. I think the Brandon Cooks point they made was a good one as well. I think it's just a type of spot to remember where he's chalked the week before, puts up a literal 0, gets a $400 price decrease on DraftKings, has arguably a better matchup, and you get him at much lower ownership. I think some of the higher stakes guys remained on him. It seemed like he was a little higher owned in some of the bigger buy-in contests on DraftKings at least. But I think that's like the classic GPP spot to look to. I wrote him up in my article as well. A little pat myself on the back for that one. But unfortunately didn't necessarily translate into myself having any big tournament scores. But nice piece there. And again, we got to sometimes have a short memory in DFS and can't be too quick to put people onto the blacklist just for one bad game, and got to try and view each week on its own and not let any of those personal biases or the guys that personally, maybe didn't do the best for us. Got to let that go sometimes and just look at the numbers and play those plays.
Right. And it's hard to stomach sometimes. And you kind of, in DFS, you like to look at historical trends and historical numbers, but things are different every week. Matchups, injuries can change from Thursday to Friday, and that changes everything too, right? Like, yeah, it's just crazy. Kind of, for example, last week, was it Thursday Night Football? Tom Brady against the Bears, and he was historically really good at Soldier Field, but things are different, right? Right? You don't have Chris Godwin, it's just different. Lower Vegas total.
Yep.
it's hard to get off historical trends. You know, in betting, what do they say in betting? Trend is your friend, right? But DFS is just a different animal. So it's tough to play these guys. It's tough to go back to these guys. You know, if we're recording Monday, I'm curious to see who goes back to Adam Troutman tonight when the Saints play on prime time, right? So I wouldn't be surprised if he catches a garbage touchdown or something. Everybody's pride and joy a couple weeks ago. But, yeah, it's tough, man, but that's the way to go. That's where the leverage is you got to zag when everyone zigs, and people are afraid to play the guys who might hurt them again, right? Recency bias and things like that. Anyway, last night, Sunday night, we saw Vikings, Seattle. Seattle, huge come-from-behind win. Looked horrible in the first half. Absolutely horrible against this Mike Zimmer, two deep safety look. And that defense looked like the purple people eaters in the first half. We haven't seen Russ and that offense look as flustered as they were to date. Second half, tale of two halves here, TJ. And Seattle's on a bye, and the Vikings are going to take on Atlanta in a high Vegas total game, which is where we're going with this. And I'm sure without looking at prices, there will be some chalk pieces for sure in that game. So what are your thoughts about the Seattle-Minnesota game and kind of looking ahead to the Vikings and the Falcons this week?
Yeah, I mean, great game. First of all, I think Russ is a beast. DK Metcalf is a beast. Showed them, battling through some adversity there, able to get that done down the stretch. I mean, I just think Seattle is overall a good, strong team. Unfortunately, do not have them on the main slate this week. Or are they on a bye? I think they might be on a bye, actually. So
yep, Seattle's on a bye.
Yep, so they're on a bye this week. But as we've said, I feel like every week to now, Russ, Lockett, Metcalf, pick your poison any single week, no matter who they're playing. Even in a game where they maybe are struggling for a large portion, they find a way to get it done eventually. And then on the Minnesota side of the ball, Dalvin Cook is a injury situation that we're going to monitor. I believe that as of now, the most recent news we were talking before the show, is that he's getting an MRI today to see what that is there. But whether it's him or if he is somehow out this week, then Madison would become a great play against Atlanta. I was doing some looking, and running backs are pretty much eating Atlanta alive every single week. Mike Davis, 30 DK points against them this week. Prior to that, Aaron Jones, 22 DK points. Week 3 was a little lighter one. It was Chicago. David Montgomery and Cohen combined for like 16 points, and then 23 from Zeke in week 2 and 24 from Chris Carson in week 1. So only 1 week have they let up less than 20 points, DraftKings points against a running back. And I think that either Cook or Madison will be a pretty good option that we're going to want to take a look at here. I mean, Atlanta just feel like they're one of those teams that always gets themselves involved into shootout type game scripts. Thielen's going to be in play again. He continues to see a ton of volume there on the Minnesota side. I think you can always look at Jefferson there. And then on Atlanta, the Zacchaeus, is that how we say his name? Zacchaeus Chalk was certainly a fail this week. I still think in cash games, it was the right move to play him on DraftKings just because of the potential there and the minimum price. But I think that's also prime example as to why you fade that kind of play in a tournament, because you just have no idea. We basically had 1 game sample of him doing anything in his entire career. So I think that, and Ridley is just continues to look like a monster and someone, he's getting up there now. We don't have his price for this week, but he'll probably be the most expensive wide receiver again, but with good reason. Aside from that 0, he's crushing it.
Yeah. And like you said, Adam Thielen, wide receiver 1 is just kind of gashed Seattle. It's happened too many times. They don't really ever lock anyone up. I believe their corners kind of play mostly right, left side of the field kind of thing. This isn't the Legion of Boom anymore. There's no Jamal Adams either right now. Adam Thielen has seen at least 8 targets in 4 out of 5 games now. He had 1 clunker in there. Everybody's like, oh, I don't know. Here comes Justin Jefferson. And he disappointed a lot of people yesterday or over the weekend. I'm sorry if you're playing Showdown or whatnot. And, this is a Vikings team who they don't want to throw the ball 45 times a game. They want to run the ball, right? And it stinks because we know Dalvin's talent. He's elite, can he ever make it through a full season? I don't know. Depending on Madison's price, and I'm sure since the pricing's not out yet, and if there is Cook news, they will adjust it. I don't think it's going to be like egregiously high, and I think he's probably going to be good chalk, probably, depending on – I'm just guessing out loud here. Especially in PPR, and like you said, Atlanta gives up a lot of points to backs, especially pass-catching backs. And Dalvin Cook is heavily involved in this pass game for the most part. They don't really – their target share was so – microscopic between Thielen, Jefferson, and a little bit of Dalvin Cook that when Irv Smith was getting in the mix yesterday, it's like they had no choice but to find somebody else. 5 targets yesterday for Irv Smith. This is only the second time this season he's had more than 1 in a game. So whatever back is in this game is going to be featured. I know it goes without saying for Dalvin, but Madison can play. The kid can ball. He looked really good in the second half last night. And I was actually quite impressed with how well the Vikings offensive line did play throughout the course of the game. So that was a big takeaway. But yeah, I mean, this is going to be another game. Atlanta, this whole season is going to be featured in a lot of chalkier games, a lot of chalkier builds. And sometimes you just have to eat the chalk, man. It's not something I love doing, but this is setting up for another matchup with kind of the same thing. And, I'm just, if Minnesota is going to keep dropping 2 safeties over the top and really is just going to run a million crossing patterns, is probably going to have 12, 13 targets again against Minnesota this coming week.
Yeah, definitely. And we're just taking a step back and looking at the slate as a whole. It's not the prettiest slate from a fantasy perspective. Like, we have this Atlanta-Minnesota game, which is probably the most fantasy friendly, maybe Green Bay, Tampa as well. Then like Detroit, Jacksonville, like it's definitely not the teams that we're used to listing as being part of the game stacks. So I think it should be a fun week and interesting. And I guess the other thing that we should talk about on the Atlanta side is Todd Gurley's monster game there. I mean, he continues to only play about half the snaps, 55% of snaps, but obviously did some good work with his touches. So I still personally don't love it, just because I'd prefer to go to the running backs that have more of that workhorse type of role. But I mean, he's been getting it done on his 14, 15 carries. Getting into the end zone is the big case. So I guess that's probably the thing with Gurley. So maybe he's more of a FanDuel type of play because he has that touchdown equity. Like I just don't see a ton of. I know he got over the 100-yard bonus this past week, but I mean, 121 yards on 14 carries obviously is not a sustainable thing. I just don't know if he's getting the ball enough to get those 100-yard bonuses. And he did have 5 targets this week, but generally speaking has been super involved in the pass game. So I think that Gurley's a nice like FanDuel GPP guy to look at, just because he does have the touchdown upside. But got to at least give him credit where credit's due. Put up a nice game this week.
Yeah, I'm with you, and there definitely could be some touchdown regression, and these points have not been coming from Matt Ryan lately. That's for certain. He has 1 touchdown pass in his last 3 games now. He's only thrown for over 300 yards once this year. Is Matt Ryan #washed, TJ? What's going on with Matt Ryan? And just to piggyback off the Gurley thing, it's hard, to wrap our heads around this new age NFL, and it seems like every week there's more and more committees and more touches being spread around. We talked about it last week with the Browns and Kareem Hunt. I know there's a couple games that need to be played yet, but Todd Gurley is quietly 8th in the league right now with 79 rushing attempts, which is crazy to think about, right? Not a whopping total. And the guys ahead of him, Josh Jacobs, Joe Mixon, Dalvin Cook, Ezekiel Elliott, Derrick Henry, you're like, okay, probably, right? Yeah, Clyde Edwards-Helaire, Kenyon Drake, still waiting on that big Kenyon Drake game. I saw Freezing Cold Takes Twitter retweeted what he said before the season about, I'm going to win you a fantasy championship. Still waiting on it, Kenyon. I'm going to keep playing you in these great matchups, and then you're going to pop off against, like, the Ravens or something. I don't know who's on their schedule, but it's going to be one of those. And then there's Todd Gurley. So you're right. He is pretty touchdown dependent because he's generally not going to catch those passes. So I do like him on FanDuel more than DK, if we have live scoring, that is. And Yeah, but yeah, I mean, hey, honestly, a lot of people were like totally bashing Todd Gurley before the season. A lot of people shied away from him in annual league drafts, and he's been pretty good. So, knock on wood, we know he's having injury history. We know they like to give the ball to Brian Hill sometimes, which isn't great for anybody except Brian Hill. But yeah, there's going to be a lot of ownership in that game, and without the pricing, it's hard to really dive too deep into it. Could be a good bounce back spot for Justin Jefferson for sure. But yeah, I don't expect the Minnesota defense to play as well as they did against Seattle. I guess I see a little regression there probably. So those are my thoughts on that one.
Yep, I agree. I think it's one of the more appealing games of the week for sure. I think another interesting one, as well as I think we have something to talk about it in Cleveland. So Cleveland Pittsburgh's coming up this week. It's a 51-point total. Pittsburgh 3.5-point home favorites, and I think the thing that I was paying most attention to in Cleveland this week was the running back situation with Chubb out, and I mean it was pretty much the Kareem Hunt show, right? I think that the final snap counts ended up being 70-30 in favor of Hunt, but I believe that the majority of D'Ernest Johnson's snaps came late in the game when I don't know if Hunt was nursing a little bit of an injury or something, but yeah, he had 20 carries for 72 yards, 4 targets, caught 3 of them, 21 yards and a touchdown. And I mean, I think Kareem Hunt is just a talented back. So, and he gets involved in the passing game. So he's someone, I mean, it's interesting this week because we don't have Zeke on the slate. We don't have Kamara. We may or may not have Dalvin Cook. So there's not a ton of elite running backs to look at. And I think that Kareem Hunt is somebody worth paying attention to. Going against Pittsburgh is not the ideal matchup, but Miles Sanders was able to put up plenty of fantasy points this week. So it's just, I think it'll be a high-scoring game, and I think Hunt will get his involvement there. So I think that's a good game to target. Obviously, Odell will continue to be in play, always has that big playability. And then on the Pittsburgh side of the ball, poor Deontay Johnson just can't stay on the field after getting injured and then missing a week and then comes back and pretty much gets injured right off the jump. And then Chris Claypool just has the game of the week, like you said, at less than 1% ownership. So we'll continue. Do you happen to know what Deontay Johnson's situation is? Is it like a long-term thing?
I don't know as of right now. I haven't seen anything confirmed. We'll try to update that throughout the show if we see anything here. But yeah, one of the other things was the emergence of Chase Claypool, who had more targets, 11, on Sunday than he did throughout the rest of the season. Taking advantage of that Deontay Johnson injury, Deontay had 23 targets throughout the first 2 weeks, left the last 2 games with injuries. Just to run this down, Eric Ebron saw 6. He was second on the Eric Ebron, 5 targets week 2, 7 targets week 3, 6 week 5. He didn't play week 4. No one played. Pittsburgh didn't play week 4. So, he's up there averaging 6 targets a week the last 3 weeks. That's kind of, it doesn't have a ton to show for it. But that's, if you're looking for a tight end bargain with a guy who is getting some looks, and we know he's a big red zone guy, obviously. So, Ebron, interesting. We'll have to monitor Deontay's status. Juju only 5 targets. Juju's only saw 8 targets once this year. What's up with not?
Yeah, I don't know.
He's seen better coverage, I'm sure, but still, right? Like, where's the volume?
Yeah, it's very strange to me because, like you said, it was early in the season. It was Deontay Johnson that was getting the majority of the targets, and you would think that once he goes down, that they would go Juju's way, but instead Claypool's getting 12 targets. So it's hard to say exactly what's going on there, but it doesn't. It seems like Juju is maybe not what we thought he was going to be coming into this season.
Yeah, it's bizarre. And listen, even the best receivers get volume when they're seeing good coverage, and they haven't played a ton of good secondaries. Snap-wise, Deontay Johnson, got hurt early, only played 6 snaps. So just seeing how it was distributed was, Juju played 57 snaps, James Washington 53, and Claypool 52. So, and James Washington, the kid's super athletic too. So it's almost like a pick your poison kind of thing. They're both going to be heavily involved if Deontay's sidelined, and it might be a week where it's like, okay, maybe James Washington might be the GPP guy. I want maybe had a decent amount of targets. Obviously, they were picking on Claypool's matchup quite a bit, and I'm sure you watched a lot of that game. Unfortunately, TJ, for you and the Birds fans, but if those three guys are going to see a lot of snaps, they've run a decent amount of three wide stuff. It might James Washington could be a pump play in a large GPP field. It's interesting to see what they price Claypool at. I really couldn't even give you a number right now.
Yeah, it's a good question. I really am not sure. I mean, maybe he's like a mid 4K guy, although they have been pretty quick to price up some of these receivers sometimes, jumping them right up to like more of the 5K range. So I'm sure that will be a topic of discussion throughout the week. If Deontay Johnson is out, he could emerge as a value player that everyone's going to look to. And I mean, it's honestly, it's tough to say whether it's good or bad chalk, because we just don't have a ton of a sample size, right? It could be similar to what we saw with the Zacchaeus, where he had one big game and then everyone tries to play him and then is pretty much irrelevant out there. But I think Claypool at least has a little bit of a, talent kind of pedigree that he's coming with. So, and then, I mean, James Conner has just been like kind of average, I guess. It's not like he's been bad, but he's not putting up great numbers. He's been fine, but he's not doing anything special. He's playing like 60% of the snaps,
which is average for a back in 2020. Yeah. But he's just been. I played him in the luxury box. A lot of guys in that price range I thought he'd come in a little under-owned, and I don't know. You're right. He's kind of just been a guy. Like, he's been okay. Like, it is what it is.
Right? He'll get his 18, 20 touches. I don't think he's a bad play by any means, but he hasn't really shown a massive ceiling as of yet. But of course, he could get a multiple touchdown game and reach that ceiling. So I think he's someone worth looking at, and seems to continue to go overlooked every week. I don't see him emerging as the chalk guy. So he's someone that we can look to as a pivot in tournaments off of the, if Madison becomes a thing or Dalvin Cook. I'm sure Mike Davis again will be a chalkier option.
Right. And, football's so variant. He could dump it in twice, from the 5-yard line or something. Just it's just when you can pivot in football at the running back position, it's the way to go. And we've seen a lot of data this year now, and some of it's by chance where the ball lands inside the 5. Oh wow, James Washington tackled at the 3. Damn, here comes James Conner, plods his way in, and I'm sure there's opportunities that Edwards-Helaire had, like that pick play and some things you don't see in the box score we talked about. So football's it's a tough game. It's kind of like MLB DFS. Mike Trout hits the ball 4 times in the warning track. You don't get anything for it, but he looked good. But if I'm, that's a good contrarian look. I'm imagining we'll see a lot of Roethlisberger kind of stacks in that game. And, the Steelers' front 7's been so good. 4 of the 5 top pressure leaders, I think, or 3 of the top 5 with TJ Watt, Bud Dupree, and I'm missing somebody. But that's going to be a tough test for this Cleveland line, who's looked pretty good so far, for sure. But also worth noting, Baker Mayfield had x-rays on his ribs, and I think he tweeted out, "I'm good. Mama didn't raise no wuss." But definitely worth monitoring, throughout the rest of the week here. So high Vegas total there. I know we mentioned the Jags and the Lions, TJ, and not your typical household names, especially on the Jags end where you see 54.5. Matt Ryan, the inside Detroit Lions, they love playing inside. They're going to play in the swamp in Jacksonville, 3.5-point faves as of right now. So I have to look at some stuff. It's just hard to get into matchups here. The Jaguars have had like 12 to 15 guys on their injury report every week so far. So I kind of really can't pick out who I like the best until Friday or Saturday when the final reports start rolling in. But I'm curious to see the pricing. Kenny Golladay came back, played a lot. It didn't really go crazy in the Saints game. I think that was, he was pretty chalky a couple weeks ago. But he's my first thought in this game. I just can't get over not using DeAndre Swift more. I can't get over them bringing Adrian Peterson and giving him the volume. I guess my first thought is I like Kenny Galladay, depending on his price, and it really wasn't too high before their bye week, so I can't imagine it being crazy. And we have to keep tabs on DJ Chark. Haven't found anything on him yet. He left with an ankle injury, but obviously that opens up some things for Chenault, who's probably the biggest volume guy out of their skill guys outside of Robinson, right? I don't know. It's a tough one for a 50-plus total. Just giving you our Monday thoughts is tough to decipher right now.
Yeah, it's crazy, right? We got a 54.5 total, and we don't really want to play too many guys. I mean, I agree. I think Galladay is certainly the premier football fantasy player in this game. And then, beyond that, yeah, I guess we'll monitor DJ Chark's situation. If he's playing, I think he's certainly a fine play. He's got a ton of upside. And then, yeah, I think Chenault would probably be next in line. Let's see, taking a look at their targets from last week on the Jacksonville side.
You want to talk about spreading the ball around?
Really? Yeah.
Yeah.
8 targets for Chenault, 7 for Eifert, 7 for James Robinson, 6 for Cole, 5 for Chark, 5 for – who's Colin Johnson? I don't even know who that is. 5 for Colin Johnson. Man, they're really spreading it out. Even James O'Shaughnessy's getting 3 targets. And then Chris Thompson, Chris Connolly, 3 and 2 each. So, yeah, really spreading the ball out on the Jacksonville side of things. Makes it difficult to be confident in who we're picking and limits that ceiling, I guess. If you don't have the offense flowing through 1 or 2 guys, it's playing a little bit of roulette trying to guess who the ball's going to go to. And then I think that Robinson was somebody that people were looking at this week, and I think we saw the problem with him is that if they get behind from a game script perspective, that's where Chris Thompson's going to come into play. So in week 4, Robinson saw 76% of the snaps, but he was down to 57% last week with Thompson playing the remaining 47% as they're trailing from behind in that passing back role. So yeah, it's an interesting game, and I'm not really jumping to play either of the quarterbacks either, despite the high total here. So
I agree. It's tough. Jags spreading the ball out, and like I said, those FanDuel Millie teams, 2 of the top 4. I was just looking at them. If they stand, the scores haven't changed since this podcast started, so I'm thinking they're probably final. 2 of the top 4 played Houston Stacks and didn't run it back with anybody in the Jags, and really nobody really ate on the Jags. But Cooks was cheap. Fuller was affordable. Watson was fairly cheap, all things considered, with all the other guys up top. So not exactly what I look to do is playing a QB receiver and not running it back, like you said, limits the ceiling. But there's that small percentage of time where I guess you could do it. Detroit giving up a whopping. Let me ask you this. If you would have guessed without looking, don't look at that screen. How many rushing yards per game are the Lions giving up so far this year?
How many are they giving up?
I'll give you a clue. They're dead last in the league.
In terms of they're giving up a lot?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, wow. Are they giving up over 100?
Over 100, yeah.
120?
I'm looking at this number, and I don't even know if it's real. I have to go to another site to make sure.
To validate?
Yeah. It says $170 right now.
Wow.
And I just remember Aaron Jones chunking, right? Week 2 or whatever it was. Yeah. I have to go back and look at another site. I'll get back to you on that.
Make sure it's real. But I have a feeling people will be going back to Robinson. I mean, I will. I mean, I've been kind of picking on Detroit. I played Aaron Jones that week. Worked out pretty well. They gave up a lot of explosive run plays, a lot of 10-plus gashers. Mm-hmm. And I think the involvement of him in the pass game is pretty big, right? Yeah, definitely. And Mixon, remember Mixon's big game?
Mixon.
Against them.
So what are we going to get some recency bias with Robinson killing people, or people, are they going to see the Detroit matchup and, is he going to be the Galladay correlation maybe? I mean, I'll be interested. I want to see his price. Let's go DFS sites. Let's get that pricing out. I want to see what's going on. But yeah, so maybe he's the play. Maybe he's the play. I'll get back to you if that number's fictional or not. But let's move on here. Like you said, a lot of strange games here. A couple games we don't have Vegas totals on. because with COVID and everything. Titans-Texans is at 1. Broncos-Pats doesn't have a total. We could talk about them a little bit, but we'll see here. How about, and it might pain you a little bit, but Ravens-Eagles, 46.5 total. Eagles are 7.5-point dogs as of right now. Lamar looked good last week. He looked like Lamar again. Pretty much coasted the whole game, though. The defense was really good. Baltimore's D broke the slate, both sites. We don't really see a defensive team put up 25-plus fantasy points on the reg. So, if you didn't have them, you might have been swimming upstream here or there. So, all right, I'll give you the floor, Philly guy. Let's hear it.
Yeah, I think the Eagles will have a tough time with Baltimore for sure. And, it's just outside of Miles Sanders, there's not – and Ertz is still there. But Fulgham just all of a sudden is going to be the guy that we have to get the ball to. It's a desperate state of affairs in terms of the receiving corps in Philadelphia right now. Now maybe Deshaun Jackson comes back soon, but maybe he'll come back for 5 minutes and then get hurt again. Maybe Alshon Jeffrey will come back and probably not be all that impactful as well. So I'm not going to have a ton of interest in my Philadelphia Eagles against this Baltimore defense. And then on the Baltimore side of things, I think something to keep an eye on is that Lamar has not been – we're seeing a downtrend in the amount that he's running the ball. And I don't know if that is intentional or just happens to be the way these games are playing out. But the last 3 weeks, his rush attempts have gone from 9 to 7 to 2 last week. 2 rushing attempts. I'd have to guess that that's probably the fewest he's ever had. I'm looking, I've got some game logs up here from last year, and more often than not, he was running the ball over 10 times a game. So that's something to keep an eye on, because his price continues to be the most expensive quarterback on the slate. And the reason for that is that he's running the ball, that we're used to him running the ball and having that rushing equity. Sometimes when you're playing him last year, you're hopeful that you get the 100-yard rushing bonus. And now he's going out and only rushing the ball 2 times in a game where they score 27 points. So thought that stood out to me. But then I think the other thing is that Hollywood Brown and Mark Andrews are pretty much in tournament contention every single week.
Yep.
The upside is just there. When they score touchdowns, it's typically those guys when it's not Lamar on the ground. So I like Hollywood for sure in this matchup. Probably like Andrews as well. Again, we don't have pricing. Hollywood seems to always be right in that mid-range. I'm sure he'll be right around there again. But not a ton of love for the game overall, just because it's tough to stack if the Eagles aren't going to be able to hang. But, yeah, let's keep an eye on Lamar and his rushing going forward, because I don't think I want to pay top dollar for him if he's not going to be getting it on the ground.
No, you made a lot of good points there. We're looking for quarterbacks that are rushing side. They just seem to be in a bunch of GPP winners this year. First of all, I can confirm that in 4 games, the Lions have given up 681 rushing yards, which comes out to about a little over $170 per game. So multiple sources have said so. So I'll be interested in Robinson this week unless the price is absurd. So
yeah.
that might be the place to attack Detroit. You can make a case for the ball going anywhere. But for Lamar, shame on me for not really sitting down and watching every Ravens game. But just a couple things that come to mind is he didn't practice a lot this week. How hurt maybe is he? He had that injury designation. RG3 was taking a lot of snaps. I don't know. Maybe he's been battling something all year that we just don't know about. Oftentimes, some guys go through a full season. You look on Twitter, so-and-so had surgery to repair or whatever he was dealing with for the whole year. It's possible. Also possible teams are just containing him differently. We saw the Titans do it to them in the playoffs, kind of really limited him for the most part. And, he's a big part of that team. And maybe the scripted run plays just aren't as effective as they were. You have a full year of tape on them. Defenses adjust, and I'm just thinking the first guy that comes to my mind, of course, he had a horrible injury and stuff. But when RG3 first came in the league, we were like, man, here we go. But teams seem to catch on. It's a smart league. I don't know. Yeah, definitely. If he's only going to run the ball 3 or 4 times a game, that Price has his rushing upside built into it. He gets 60, 70 yards on FanDuel. That's huge with it being such a TD scoring site. So make a lot of good points. I'm with you. And, he's not a guy that's going to throw over 300 yards 75% of the time. He's playing chess while the league's playing checkers. And Mark Roman's done a great job with that offense. But if he's limited moving forward, he's going to have his work cut out for him, I would assume. Obviously, they rolled past Cincinnati. No problems there. They have 3 good running backs, which is a disaster for us and the industry. It's almost unplayable. You can't really play these guys other than throwing a dart out there, and Mark Ingram and J.K. Dobbins, who I think is exceptional and will be really good when Ingram goes somewhere else next year. And, of course, Gus Edwards was pretty good too. So that's interesting. And, yeah, the target share is so condensed with Marquise Brown and Mark Andrews. And Lamar's not been very good throwing the ball deep either. He missed Marquise on a couple of deep ones the previous week, and a lot of people were talking about it. And even on the Chiefs primetime game where they got slaughtered, he had Brown on a couple of deep passes. The targets are there, though, right? And it's basically them. I don't even know why Miles Boykin's on the field. He doesn't even look at him. He's just a placeholder out there. He's like a pawn on the chessboard. He just doesn't do anything. And Boykin's super talented. He has physical skills, and I really wish they'd use him more. I mean, God, 2 targets, 4 targets, 2 targets. Last 3 weeks for Miles Boykin. The kid's awesome. Marquise Brown, 10 targets this week, 8 targets week 4. 6 targets in all the other weeks. That's pretty good volume, right? So I'm with you. I wish Miles Boykin would be more involved instead of kind of just being a guy that lines up at the line of scrimmage. But it doesn't look like much is going to change there.
Yeah. Yep. I agree. I think it's Hollywood's definitely my favorite there. He's getting the volume, like you said, and of course always has that big play upside. And it's an interesting slate overall because we've been talking every week about these high-end quarterbacks that have that rushing upside in addition to being able to throw the ball, and most of them just aren't on this slate, right? We don't have Russ, we don't have Kyler, we don't have Dak, obviously. I mean, we didn't touch on that yet, but thoughts go out to Dak. I mean, you hate to see that. No matter what, obviously, and that's just a very unfortunate situation. So hopefully he is able to recover and continue on from there. But yeah, no Dak, no Josh Allen, no Patrick Mahomes. So that's kind of all the premier quarterbacks that we're tending to look at here. We do have Aaron Rodgers in the Tampa game, which is another one that has one of the higher totals on the board. So it could be a week where Rodgers ends up being the kind of top end quarterback that people are looking at. But yeah, just find that interesting. Like, are people going to want to go back to Lamar Jackson since all those other options that we're typically looking at aren't there this week? I'm not sure. I think people may continue to be gun shy with just because he hasn't quite produced this week. So,
and maybe we're wrong. Maybe he is healthy. I don't know, but. And there hasn't been many games where he's had to run, I guess, right? They kind of cruise past
maybe that's
Cincinnati.
What it is, right? I mean, maybe it's a conversation of like, hey, if we don't need you to run, then you should not be running in these games where we're blowing out a team so that they don't risk any injury. I mean, that would just be smart. So it's probably some combination of that. And like you said, the defense is figuring it out and forcing him to throw the ball. I mean, he threw the ball 37 times and only completed 21 passes. So
it's not good.
That's not great.
It's funny looking at this.
I'd rather deal with that than watch him run up and down the field for 100 yards.
Definitely. That's the blueprint, if there is one, Just looking at the snap averages, Hollywood's averaging 44.5. That leads the wide receivers and tight ends. Mark Andrews, 40. Miles Boykin is at 40. And Willie Snead's at 39. Boykin and Snead aren't on the field to block either. So it just blows my mind that I know maybe they aren't at the caliber of Brown or Andrews, but teams are covered. Like, there's a lot to worry about on Baltimore and Lamar, but if he's not going to run, and he's not looking like, if he's just not running and you have Andrews and Brown, like I just don't know how Boykin and Snead don't get involved. It's one of these days, Snead will have his 6 for 40 and 2 touchdown game. One of these slates, right? Classic Willie Snead. He'll probably be in a primetime slate too, because that's where he always becomes relevant. And then he'll just right off into the sunset again for the rest of the year. But yeah, so that's it for the Ravens. We'll start to wrap things up here. A couple other games that we're not going to spend a ton of time on. Panthers are going to host the Bears, 44 Vegas total. The Bears are pretty good against receivers this year. I think the first touchdown of the year they gave up to wide receivers was last week against Tom Brady. So could be kind of a slow game. Mike Davis still in play. Are you interested in Montgomery at all on the other side, attacking this Panthers front seven?
Yeah, I was looking at Montgomery because we talk about the lack of workhorse running backs, but he kind of has that role, right? I was taking a look. He played 80% of the snaps, but 10 carries for 29 yards. And he did get in the end zone, but then he also had 8 targets. But again, 7 catches for 30 yards. So he's getting the volume. He just hasn't, at least so far, done a ton with that. But maybe this is the week where going against the Carolina defense that hasn't had a ton of success. We obviously just talked about Todd Gurley running all over them this past week. So I do have a little bit of interest in Montgomery. And I think that the 8 targets is what kind of does it for me, because he's not typically someone that we think of as a pass catching type of back. Allen Robinson had 17 targets this week. Is that correct?
Wide receiver 1.
Just looking. Whew. That's right. I almost forgot about that because it was
Thursday.
That was on Thursday, but wow. I just pulled that up. Yeah. So, that's 17 targets for Allen Robinson, 8 for David Montgomery. It seems like the Chicago offense is basically flowing through the 2 of those guys. But yeah, like you said, Chicago has a solid defense. We've been talking about Carolina being a team that gets themselves into shootouts, but this may be one of those matchups where that doesn't quite happen just because of the Bears D. But
Agreed. Their strengths kind of play into Chicago's strengths there, it seems like, looking across the board. But yeah, 17 targets, Nick Foles. I don't know how. He played poorly and still beat Tom Brady.
He did look bad.
He looked pretty bad.
He
still beat Tom Brady. Yeah, being blunt, he did not look good. So, yeah, another game, lower total. Colts 7.5-point faves against Cincinnati. The Bengals got absolutely obliterated by Lamar and company. We talked about Colts defense has been stingy, pretty good. Some people were suggesting maybe they're not as good as the statistics were showing over the first couple of weeks. I think they're formidable. They're at home. Since he's young, AJ Green is completely washed. And he got hurt, I believe, too. Hope he's all right. Sorry for calling you washed and you got hurt. But we knew this was Tyler Boyd's team to begin with, and Joe Mixon, the skill guys. Could be a Jonathan Taylor week. Jonathan Taylor could definitely carry some ownership. Bengals are giving up over 150 yards a game on the ground. Jonathan Taylor is 9th in the league in carries right now. One of the few quote-unquote workhorses, or lack thereof, whatever you want to call it. So I like the spot for Taylor, at home against the Bengals. Geno Atkins has been hurt all year. So I think he's going to be in play. He'll without a lot of these studs, depending on his price, he'll probably carry decent ownership, I would say. So I think Jonathan Taylor's in play. Philip Rivers looked really bad last week. T.Y. Hilton still hasn't had it. They just can't get it together. So I'm a little surprised they haven't been at least above average, right? T.Y. is fairly healthy. It's just not been working out for those two. You have any quick hits from that game coming up?
Yeah, I do have some interest in Taylor. Like you said, the backfield's been pretty split between Taylor and Hines. It's been a little all over the place, but I think there's some upside for Taylor there just in that matchup. But yeah, Indy, is Phillip Rivers kind of washed now too? I think some of these quarterbacks that have been around for a while maybe just don't quite have it anymore, and they're on their last legs here. So Yeah, that's what makes this week interesting is that there's very few quarterbacks that you want to play, which then makes it hard to figure out what games you want to stack. So I think it's going to be a different week and an interesting one. I wouldn't be surprised if we see it be like a lower scoring week. You know, scores that are winning GPPs, maybe not as high as we've seen in recent memory, just because the scoring may be down across the board, and also it's just, at least at this first look, there's not a ton of plays where it jumps out as like, oh yeah, here's a slam dunk spot. You know, we've got Zeke at home against the Giants like we had last week, or we've got, you know, Kamara in a spot. Like we don't have those guys on this slate. So
Right.
good week to make sure we do our extra digging and find some of these unique spots and take some of these lower end plays and play them in our tournaments.
Agreed. The football team will take on the Giants. 43 total right now. Cool to see Alex Smith on the field. I guess we don't really know who's going to play next week. Right now with Kyle Allen getting hurt, I don't know his status. I think it's still up in the air as far as I know. On the flip side, Danny Jones has been, I don't know, just a guy. Slayton's getting a ton of targets. Ingram hasn't done anything. Like eventually he's going to do something. Freeman's been okay. So I could see a couple Giants one-offs. Maybe, I don't know. I don't know what we're going to get out of Alex Smith either, right? He just got hit for the first time last week. What's the deal with Terry? Is he going to get targets? Is Smith just going to check down if he plays? Is Kyle Allen going to play? I don't know. It's Monday. It's tough to really say in that game. I mean, I'm not going to have a ton of pieces from that game anyway, but, anything from that one?
Yeah, I mean, it's going to be an ugly game overall. I think, if anything, the pieces, Slayton, as you mentioned, and then, we'll have to keep an eye on Terry. That's probably the most upsetting thing about Haskins getting benched is that he was just chucking it to Terry or just giving it to Terry and letting him run with it, but saw his targets good. He only had 3 catches this past week, so it's gonna be it's just tough for him to get the ball. Probably just mostly a pass in that game, maybe some Slayton, maybe some McLaurin, but other than that, I think the Logan Thomas thing, I think we can say is officially done, which is a sigh of relief because that was a trap play for a while there, but I don't think we're not even tempted by that anymore.
Titans, Texans, the Titans are supposedly going to play Tuesday. Broncos, Pats. A lot of moving pieces with those games. We don't know a ton. A lot of things could change in those with COVID situation, things like that. So we'll let the rest of the Rotogrinders team kind of keep you up to date on those games throughout the week. There's plenty of information at Rotogrinders, guys. Get over there. A lot of free stuff, but even greater premium stuff. Podcasts, live shows, great articles. TJ writes a great article, GPP articles, core plays. The optimizer is great with lineup tags. It's just accessible information. The premium data usage app that shows you snaps and ADOT and targets. Get out there. The team will keep you updated throughout the rest of the week. Love the Rotogrinders team we have here. So before we get out of here, let's talk about the Packers-Bucks. That's the other probably game that will carry some significant ownership. The Jets and Dolphins play at 4. Kudos to the Finns going all the way out there and laying the hammer. Garoppolo did not look good. Just have to throw it in. That did not look good. But the Dolphins are 8-point favorites at home against Adam Gase and the Jets. I don't know what's going to – who I can even – I don't know. Outside of Jay Crowder – Fitzpatrick revenge game. He's a revenge game against half the league at this point, right? He's played for everybody. Maybe someone like Devontae Parker. I don't know. There will be a piece in that game that is probably in a really good lineup. I just can't mentally wrap my head around the Dolphins being an 8-point favorite right now at all. So, any quick thoughts on that game, and then talk to me about Aaron Rodgers versus the GOAT himself, Tom Brady.
Crazy to see the Dolphins at such a big favorite, but I think it says more about the Jets than it does about the Dolphins. Gaskin's been decent, right? So, maybe he's someone that you take a look at there. Certainly not a household name that we're used to clicking, but I think you can take some pieces there. And on the Jets side, I don't think there's much to write home about I think that Jeff Smith guy had a bunch of targets again and played every snap, but didn't do anything production-wise. So not a ton of interest on that side. I would say Gaskin, if anything, is someone to take a look at depending on what pricing looks like when it comes out.
Yeah, Gaskin's been surprised. One of the surprises of the league. You pay Jordan Howard $10 million to come do nothing. You bring in Matt Breida to do nothing. Yeah,
teams are doing that a lot. Like, not across the league. It's kind of wacky sometimes.
We need to pay $10 million to make sure no one has over 60% of the snaps in the backfield this year, boys. Go get them. Go get them. Like, I don't understand. But, yeah, so this 4 o'clock, national TV game, Packers, Bucks. Chris Godwin, as far as I know, not available, right? Mike Evans quietly at least 8 targets in 3 of the last 4 weeks. He had that one crazy game where he had 2 catches for 2 yards and 2 scores, but Brady doesn't really have a choice but to get him the football. Gronk at least 6 targets in 2 of the past 3 weeks now. Cameron Brate came in at 6 targets last week. Ronald Jones has been heavily involved in the passing game, right? So that's good to see. So those are going to be some guys to target. And we talked about it. Like, there's some very competitive individual matchups between both teams' receivers and the corners. Because I don't really think either defense is bad, but they're not necessarily good, in my opinion. So it's going to be very interesting, I think. Tampa Bay at home, Green Bay coming south. No Devontae Adams as of now, correct? So we're going to see Aaron with a limited cast again. Aaron Jones is a volume guy. He's heavily involved in the pass game too. Tampa's really good against the run. So what are your thoughts on that matchup? Let's start there. Aaron Jones against that Tampa run D. I mean, is he going to be under-owned because of that matchup, do you think?
Yeah, I could definitely see that being the case. And I think also, there's also a Jamal Williams factor in play there, right? Like he's still getting – it's almost a 50-50 split some weeks snap-wise between the two, and Jamal Williams seems to get himself involved in the passing game. I know that they were on bye this past week, but in week 4, Williams had 8 targets. Jones also had 5. So I think Jones is in play, though. I mean, he just, as he showed, he has crazy upside, even if he's not playing 80, 90% of snaps. He can still do plenty, and they'll certainly get him the ball when he's out there. So I think that Jones is someone that we can take a look at. But, yeah, my guess is that he won't be the chalkiest running back. He'll probably be one of the more expensive ones. And I think people will favor more of like the Dalvin Cook if he's back and playing. And then, yeah, in terms of the Green Bay passing game, without Adams, it's a little bit of a guessing game. I mean, I'm curious to see what Tanyan's price is going to be, because he had that monster game last time out that was not on the main slate. And I mean, we don't have some of the premier tight ends again this week, right?
Agreed.
Like, we don't have Kelsey, we don't have Kittle, so tight end's going to be ugly, I think.
I'm curious.
I don't think we've talked about any tight ends actually. Now that I feel like we haven't talked about a single tight end today. I think
you're right. I just said Evan Ingram was bad. That was it, I think. So it was nothing positive.
And I said Logan Thomas is bad. So
that's 2 bads. That's 2 bads and maybe an overpriced Tanyan, right? We'll see what happens. But I think, anybody is a peg up from Atlanta's defense. So I want to see what Aaron Rodgers could do against the Bucs have been a formidable defense. Atlanta's atrocious. So he's going to go out there with Shepard and MVS and Tanyan against a stout run D. I want to see it. I'm a big Aaron Rodgers guy. I want to see it. I don't know. It's hard for me, depending on price. I don't know if I'm going to go there. I don't know. I guess it's definitely worth monitoring for sure. Keyshawn Vaughn got hurt and he fumbled. So on my season-long team where I had to start him in my 16-team league, which shows you how decimated I am, I had a nice negative point going into the week. Gotta love that on a Thursday. And you're like tilting after Thursday in your annual league. And we did see last week that Fournette just suited up and he was just kind of there in case of emergency. And this is the guy who came in week 2 and out-touched Ronald Jones. So that's – man, I don't trust Bruce Arians. I don't trust him from a fantasy perspective. He's like the 2020 Mike Shanahan. Like, I don't know. I like Rojo, but we'll have to see. If they say Fournette's healthy, I'd be a little suspect, but definitely worth monitoring, I think.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, ideally, Fournette is not really involved, and then I think Jones is very much in play. Was getting a ton of the snaps last time out. Was also involved in the passing game. So, but yeah, if Fournette's back in the picture, though, then you just have yet another committee that's just going to be tough to gauge.
You're right, and I'm just looking at this slate before we get out of here, and there just aren't a lot of good tight ends on it either. So Hawkinson's back against the Jags. You have Hayden Hurst in a high total game. Kyle Rudolph doesn't run routes anymore. You got 3 million tight ends in Indy with Mo Alley Cox and Doyle and whatever. But Tyler Eifert's actually getting some targets in Jacksonville. And we talked about Mark Andrews, who's always in play. I have to ask you, what's up with Zach Ertz? People are bashing him on Twitter. Is he showing bad body language out there? Like, I know they didn't want to bring him back, right? There was some friction with the front office. I think we talked about that a few weeks ago. Yeah. But what's up with Ertz? Because he's one of the bigger household names on this slate.
Yeah, I'm not sure what. I think he's probably just frustrated between, not getting paid the way he wants to. Yeah. Obviously, I think you can read into that they've got Goddard, and so maybe they're viewing Goddard as more of their tight end of the future, and so for that reason they don't want to commit themselves to Ertz. Right. And I mean, it's frustrating to watch the Eagles, so it's got to be frustrating to play on the Eagles too, which is probably a factor there. But I mean, yeah, even last week, like he just wasn't. He had one catch.
Yep, that's it.
Only 5 targets.
Tough matchup this week too.
Yeah. So tight end really is ugly this week.
Very ugly. If I play Chris Herndon again, come to my house. I need an intervention. Like, do not. If I send you my lineup after lock of what I'm playing, it has Chris Herndon in it. Call 911. I don't know. Just like, I'm gonna need help. I will not play Chris Herndon in a great matchup against the Dolphins. I will not do it. I'm like Bart Simpson writing on that chalkboard in the beginning of the Simpsons. And I love playing Chris Herndon, right? Just get sucked in. On a week with no tight ends, TJ, can you play him?
It's going to have to be a pay down week just because I don't – yeah, you're right. Tanyan's going to be like way overpriced.
Maybe O.J. Howard, I don't know. We'll see. Oh, no, wait. He's done. He's not easy.
No, he's out. He's hurt. You got to play Gronk if you want to play down there.
Oh, I forgot O.J. Howard was done for a second.
I know. It's
O.J. Howard.
Really ugly. It's going to be bad.
Anyway, guys, check out Rotogrinders. My partner here, my man TJ Laessig. Where can they find you on Twitter?
Find me on Twitter at TJL5124DFS. Be coming out with the DraftKings GPP article again later this week. Had some pretty good picks last week. We had Zeke in there. We had Brandon Cooks. We had Calvin Ridley. We had Travis Kelce. We did have Deontay Johnson.
You built like 80% of the GPP winning lineup with that article.
I know. If I would have just put together the other pieces, could have been there. Hopefully one of you out there used that to build the winner and then have now found out that you won.
Finally on Monday night, your score is updated. But great work as usual. Thank you. Check out TJ over there on Twitter, Rotogrinders. Hit me up on Twitter too at the J Carlucci. Got any questions, any input? Give us a like, give us some feedback, subscribe. We're here to help you out. Give us our takes throughout the crazy 2020 NFL season. So for TJ Laessig, I am Justin Carlucci. Have a good week and good luck.